So usually when I talk about dharma, everyone is super psyched and is like, yeah, how do I find my dharma? How do I find my dharma? And it turns out that your dharma is intrinsically linked to your karma or karma. And that finding the right dharma has a lot to do with the circumstance. Because if we go back to the example of being on the plane, remember that my dharma in that moment wasn't really determined by me. It's not something that I could have seen ahead of time. That example of finding a patient on a plane who's having a medical emergency is a karma. It's something that presents itself to me. So in order to understand what your dharma is, it really has to do with understanding what your circumstances are. And I'll start by sort of illustrating this point with kind of my own personal story and how your dharma can sort of evolve over time. And then we'll sort of go through 3 different perspectives on how to find your dharma by exploring your karma. So my story starts out actually in high school when I was playing way too many video games. And I kind of skirted through that and wound up in college, and once again, hadn't really developed too many good habits. So I was partying a lot, playing a bunch of video games. And if we really think about what my dharma was at that point, it's really to be a good student and sort of make good use of the time that I was spending there. But I kind of failed in that dharma, sort of almost failed out of college, and then wound up going to India. So my karma kind of gave me this opportunity where I was born Indian and my dad had recently gone to India. So he sort of suggested this road to me. And I can think of the 1,000 things that could have been different if I had been born in a different time or a place or a household that didn't have a link to India. Maybe I would have never gone to India. So we can see sort of karma rearing its head a little bit, poking through a little bit. And so I wound up going to India, where I discovered yoga and meditation. And then I sort of found this new kind of dharma where I decided, okay, time to become a monk, because I loved it so much. I loved that for my entire life, I'd been so confused and so frustrated with myself. Why can't I do the things that I'm supposed to do? Why is it that I can't bring myself to go to Spanish class at 8 in the morning? And I really was so frustrated with myself and loved so much that here I had found, by some miracle, a system that teaches me how I work as a human being, how my mind works, how my impulses work, how my desire works. And so then I found my new dharma, which is that I'm going to become a monk, and I'm going to teach other human beings about this awesome stuff about how the mind works. And I'm going to be so pure and so selfless, and I'm going to walk this noble road to enlightenment. That all this stuff that other people want from life is actually not for me, that I was above it. But that was actually my ego. So once again, my karma shows up and gives me a little bit of a push in a different direction. So I go back from India, return home, and then I teach meditation at this summer camp. And who do I meet at this summer camp but this beautiful woman? And she's amazing. She's a couple years younger than I am. And I had sort of decided at that point that I was going to become a monk. So there was no thought of dating anyone. There was no thought that I'm actually going to end up with her. But little did I didn't understand at the time. I was horribly in love. But, so karma sort of shows up, and then like this woman kind of appears. And it was really easy for me to like talk to her and hang out with her and stuff. I was so concerned about finding a girlfriend and finding love early on in college that it really kind of fed on my insecurities and made me super awkward. But suddenly, ironically, now that I decided to become a monk, it was really easy for me to talk to this beautiful girl because I wasn't interested in any kind of relationship. So karma sort of shows up again and pushes me in the other direction. And then over time, I do realize that actually I do really love this woman. And so then I got really confused, right? Because here I was sort of deciding to become a monk, and I'm going to learn this stuff and devote myself to spirituality. And this other part of me was like, hey, this chick is really awesome. I hope I can really spend a lot of time with her. And so then my karma sort of pushes me in that direction. And I decide being a monk isn't for me. And then I'm kind of scratching my head and I'm trying to figure out what to do with myself. And then I realize, okay, like I guess I'm going to try to go to medical school. But I've got a 2.5 GPA and I apply to medical school and nothing is really working. And so I end up actually just flying to Boston with just packing a suitcase and kind of talking to her and telling her, hey, I really feel like I need to go to Boston because that's the only place that I can sort of do research and study all this stuff that I've been learning in India. And so she says, go ahead and go. And as it turns out, I'd applied to 140 research positions, and I'd been rejected from every single one. And the 141st research position that I applied to was actually at Harvard Medical School. And it turned out that I was just visiting, so I just asked them, there's a particular lab, and I kind of emailed them and I was like, hey, I'm in town, can I come and see what kind of work you guys do there? So I traveled to this lab, and I was talking to the receptionist who was sort of showing me around, and I said, hey, this is really amazing. Is there any chance you guys have any openings? And he told me that actually just the week before, one of the research assistants had quit. So I sort of jumped past the application stage and went straight to the interview and ended up landing a research position at Harvard, of all places, after being rejected from 140 others. And so once again, my karma sort of showed up and gave me this opportunity to study the neuroscience of Tai Chi and really work with some of the most brilliant researchers in the world in sort of studying meditation and yoga and Tai Chi. And so then eventually, after a couple of years of applying to medical school and 120 rejections, I ended up getting one interview at Tufts Medical School and ended up getting in there. And so then my karma sort of changed a little bit, my dharma changed a little bit. I had my break, I had my opportunity. So I studied really, really hard, and then I entered a lottery to sort of do an away rotation at Harvard and in the psychiatry department there. And as I did that away rotation, I sort of got lucky and sort of got a spot there because hundreds of students apply. And I ended up getting a spot to audition there and rotate there for 1 month. And based on the strength of my performance there, I actually secured a spot in this Harvard Medical School residency program, which is how I became a psychiatrist. And so then we kind of see that my karma has sort of steered me in a couple of different directions and that I have different goals at different points. And then the really interesting thing is that my dharma sort of once again changed a little bit and started when I did an AMA on Reddit. So this was sort of a situation where I just posted one day that I'm a psychiatrist who's interested in video game addiction. And I got so many different upvotes and so many people asking questions. It sort of hit the front page of Reddit. And then suddenly I realized that my karma is calling me in another direction, and that there are thousands or tens of thousands of people out there who need help with video game addiction. And I'll never forget the day that I got a page on my pager that looked like it was a complete mess. It was completely garbled. It was 14 numbers. And so I call the page operator and I'm like, I'm kind of confused. I think there's a problem with my pager. And they say, no, actually, this is a phone number from Iran, and that someone actually called here looking for you, and it turned out that there was a family in Iran that had sort of heard that I do video game addiction stuff, and they had nowhere else to turn. So once again, my karma came knocking. And once it came knocking, then we started Healthy Gamer, and eventually we wound up here kind of doing this video. So at the end of the day, I want you all to understand that dharma is intrinsically linked to karma. And if you really want to understand what your dharma is, pay attention to where your karma is sort of popping up and where it's leading you. So there are 3 things I'd like to go into to sort of illustrate this principle and help you guys get on the right path. So the first is to take a sheet of paper and write down in 1 page what you think is wrong with the world. Now, you have to be really careful here because a lot of people will think, oh my God, there's so many things wrong with the world. I know exactly what's wrong with the world. And they won't actually do the exercise. They'll think they know exactly what they need to do or what they would say, but they won't sit down and write it. The interesting thing is that for 90 to 95% of people who actually do the exercise, what they find is that by the end of the page, something unexpected is to be found there. That they ended up writing about something that they didn't quite expect to write about. And the cool thing is that despite the fact that there is so many things wrong with the world, when you actually write down what you think is wrong with the world on 1 piece of paper, it forces your mind to kind of navigate towards one direction. And so you may find a particular dharma evolving from that page. And so when people do this exercise, I want you to use it as a general compass to kind of move towards. So the second thing that we can do to sort of explore our karma is to think a little bit about, the final boss of a video game or the villain in a movie, and recognize that when we think about our dharma, we sort of think about our final destiny. We think about what I want to be way in the future. The interesting thing, though, is not all of us are really ready for where our karma is leading us. And we're not really ready for our final dharma. You know, my karma of sort of helping people is kind of an evolving process. My dharma of helping people is sort of an evolving process. So I want you guys to realize that you may not be ready for that final dharma yet. And so instead, think a little bit about what is the next action I can take. From where you are right now, what is one thing that you can do that will move you forward a single step? And for people who are wondering, I don't know what direction to go, really stop and think about it, because I'm almost 100% sure that there is something in your life that you know you need to do, but you're just not ready to do it. You're not willing to do it. And the problem is that you think about all the grand things that you do instead of the little things that you do. And understand that your karma will lay waiting until you are ready. So instead of focusing on the big dharma, focus on the tiny little dharma. Whether that's financial independence, or learning how to do your own laundry, or moving out of the house, or finishing college. Start to do the tiny little dharmas of your life to move in the direction so that your karma will then present to you the bigger dharmas when you're ready. And the last thing that I want to share with y'all is sort of a standard rubric for what your dharma is at different stages of life. So we're going to share sort of an Eastern perspective on this called the ashrams, but this is to be found in Western psychology too. For example, there's a psychologist named Erik Erikson who basically said that life is divided into different stages and that all human beings have sort of a psychological growth point at different stages of their life. For example, teenage years are all about figuring out who you are. And the primary dharma of a teenager is to determine like what your identity is. That contrasts from people who are like 50 to 60 years old, where their primary dharma, their primary psychological goal is to look back on their life and really figure out, have they done enough? And start to appreciate the impact that they've made in the world. And that if we fail in these goals, we'll kind of wind up with suffering, or that sometimes we can get stuck at these various stages. So that's kind of a quick Western perspective, but now I'm going to share a little bit more in detail about an Eastern perspective called the ashrams. So the first ashram is Brahmacharya ashram. And the goal in Brahmacharya ashram is to learn or acquire a skill that allows you to be independent. So Brahmacharya ashram is all about studying and learning. It's learning how to be a capable individual. So this is generally speaking the first quarter of life, maybe about 20 to 25 years, where we're devoted to learning and acquiring skills so that we can make an impact in the world. After we're done with Brahmacharya ashram, once we have a skill set that allows us to be independent, we move to Grahasthashram, which is sort of the householder phase. And in this phase, you're actually supposed to apply your skills, everything that you've learned, for your benefit. So you sort of start to become a householder, you set up a household, you maybe get married and have kids if that's what you want to do. But actually you use your skills for your own benefit. So you travel the world and you use your skills to kind of like, satisfy your material desires. You get a super nice TV, or you go on an international trip and see the world. So it's using your skills kind of for your own benefit and establishing yourself. That's Grahasthashram, or the second phase. The third phase is Vanaprasthashram, and this is sort of the transition phase. And the goal of Vanaprasthashram is that all of these skills that you've acquired should now be turned not for your own benefit, but to benefit other people. So you don't have to devote yourselves to being like a really awesome saintly person. Actually, according to this Eastern perspective, you should use your skills to benefit yourself first. Become secure first. Take care of your own household first. And once your household is in order, then turn to more noble pursuits. Then start to help other human beings and use everything that you've accumulated. Use all of your resources and all of your knowledge to try to make the world a better place. And then that leads us to the fourth stage, which is sannyas. So sannyas is when we actually sort of give up our material life, give up this life. And it's no longer about helping myself or even helping other people. And in the final stage of life, it's really about devoting yourself to self-understanding, the road to enlightenment, or maybe giving that last portion of your life to God. And so if we look at our dharma, it is intrinsically tied to our karma. And so our karma will give us opportunities and shape what our dharma is. And so I want you all to appreciate that if you're looking for your dharma, you can start with something as simple as writing on one piece of paper what you think is wrong with the world. And there may be 1,000 answers, but by the end of the page, you'll notice that there's a particular theme that floats to the top. The second thing to keep in mind is that a lot of times we think about dharma as something very grand and epic, destiny, right? So Dr. K's destiny was to start Healthy Gamer and help people understand their mental health. But that's not what Alok's dharma was. Alok's dharma changed so much throughout my life. And so yours will too. So start to think a little bit, not about the end of the road and the end of dharma, but the beginning of the road. And where are you right now? And what is one way that you can take a single step forward? And for those of you that need a little bit more of a framework, try to look a little bit at the ashrams and understand that if you haven't figured out how to be independent, the first thing you've got to do is become independent. Become financially independent. Acquire a skill set through which you can support yourself. And then after that, establish yourself in the world. Set up your household, become independent, and enjoy the fruits of your labor, enjoy the fruits of your efforts, and actually prioritize yourself in kind of your nuclear unit first. Then transition to helping other people. Once you've kind of figured things out for yourself and you're pretty stable and secure, then use all the skills that you've acquired to try to make the world a better place. And then finally, after you've made the world a better place and you've enjoyed life yourself, then transition to the final phase of life, which is kind of devoting yourself to God or walking the road to enlightenment. Start to let go of all of these materialistic things. Understand that at this point, hopefully your children are grown up if you have them, and they're kind of independent and on their own, so let go. They have to live their own lives. And that you may try to help other people, you may go out and try to help other people, but at some point, you should really try to sort of wrap up with life, kind of close down and summarize. And so that'll be the last stage, sannyas. So my hope is that this explanation of the principle of karma will help you guys understand how to find your dharma. And through finding your dharma, you'll figure out how to gain more happiness in life, more contentment, and more peace.
Mary 9